Okay, so we are live right now. Mhm. Hey, welcome Phương Anh to our rooms. Hey. Hmm. Okay, so I think we take a few minutes to wait everyone to join so they don't miss anything. Oh, there are a lot of people. Hello, Sarah. Hello, Daniel. Oh, good morning, Pearl. So glad to have you here. And we have the chat right now. So Tracy is in the rooms right now, so feel free to say hi to her. And if there's anything that you want to learn from her, feel free to go into the chat. Yes.
Good
And
morning, everyone.
okay, so good morning. Just 1 minute. We will start in 1 minute. Hello, Sarah. Hey, Sarah, just say hi to you. Yes, and hello everyone. I'm Mia, Employee Experience Manager at Trimplex, and we have Miss Poof and Event Marketing List here with me today. And we are back with the second episode of EX Monthly Global Expert Chat. So quite a long name, but we try to make it like easy for you to recognize us through this program. And the reason why I want to continue it and make it monthly, as you know that we make one last month with Mr. Rob Baker from Telethinking with the introduction to job crafting. And actually, we received a lot of good and positive feedback. And we realized that you actually have the desire to learn from the expert, especially for the global expert, because you haven't got a chance to meet them and also interact with them. So that's the reason why I want to make it like monthly. So you will get a chance to do it like month by month and to meet the other expert. So, so as you know, our mission is like to bring everyone a better day at work. So here we are. So the second episode with Miss Tracy Brower join us virtually from Michigan, US. And I know it's 10 p.m. now. So it's gonna be really, really late. So thank you so much for joining us today. Yeah, so
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
yeah, so welcome Tracy. So how do you feel today, Tracy?
Good, very good. I'm thrilled to be here, thrilled to be with you all. And I've had some extra coffee tonight, so I'll be in good shape.
God, thank you so much. So I know you will have your introductions about yourself in your presentation, so I will let you do that. So instead of that, I will ask you a questions from Rita that we have received before this webinar. That what makes you believe in happiness?
Uh, you know, I think that happiness is so important for business outcomes. It's so important for our own individual fulfillment. And even though we're in the midst of such hard times, I think we can absolutely create happiness anyway. And in spite of those hard times, I have a conversation with someone who's writing an article about happiness tomorrow. And he said, yeah, but Tracy, can we really get happiness in a global pandemic? And I said, absolutely. Sometimes the biggest challenges are an opportunity to learn more about ourselves and our colleagues and to form strong bonds with each other. And so happiness is something that we can absolutely create and believe in.
Yes, totally agree with that. And the first time that I saw you and also I met you online, the vibe that you bring is also the happiness as well. It's
Aw.
make us really better. And also we have Miss Tu here, so thanks for being co-host with me today. So is there any specific thing that you want to learn from Tracy?
Hello, Tracy. Hello, everyone. My name is Tu, and I'm now event marketing in Triplex. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that I want to learn from you, especially about happiness at work. But for me, my very big concern is how can we take advantage of happiness to bring it to work and use it to self-develop in the working environment. Yeah, that's what my big concerns most.
Okay, so the topic for today is employee happiness, and as you know, like when we research about happiness, so there are a lot of work related to that, such as like employee engagement, like organizational cultures, meaningful job, or connecting. So, how do you define your own employee happiness? And could you give us some example that you saw in a company now in Vietnam that truly bring the happiness to work?
So I mean, from my perspective, happiness is personal, like totally personal, like mindset. Each everyone is different, but in general, I can sum up like happiness can maximize the employee performance and also potential. So I was lucky enough to work with Tiki, one of the biggest e-commerce industry in Vietnam, and they have like their own engagement team with many great activities during the month to connect people and engage their employees during the month, and also their physical space. They even have the model rooms inside the space. So I mean, yeah, this is great. In another case, I can show you. I work for Trimplex, and we try our best every month to cater a lot of activity based on our member requirements, so we can make them happy to go to work every day.
Mm, so true. So
It's such
the
a great example. I love that.
yes, but we still want to learn from you a lot because we think we still can make it better. So the reason why I would love to go with this topic for this episode is because like happiness is quite for me is quite a biased definition. So I really want to know how organizations can set the standard for this. Yes, that all we want to learn from you. And so for all the attendees, if you have any questions or any topics that related to the happiness that you want to ask Tracy, so just type in the chat box and I will bring it later in the Q&A sections. So from now on, so I will let the stage to Tracy.
Awesome. Thank you again so much. Thank you for the wonderful introduction and the examples. I will also share some examples, and please chime in with questions, and we will do questions at the end as well. So let me share my screen. I've got some slides that we can kind of talk through together and learn together. You know, I think this is such interesting times to kind of compare what we're going through and learn from each other and really create happiness together, because our relationships and our connections are such a source of happiness. So looking forward to our conversation. So I am an author of The Secrets to Happiness at Work, which has just come out. It actually officially publishes on Tuesday, but it's available for the last couple of months now. And I also wrote a book previously called Bring Work to Life, which is about work-life navigation and fulfillment. And I'm a contributor with Forbes.com and Fast Company. And I'm also a principal with Steelcase's applied research team. So really, really glad to be with you today. So here's a little bit about what the book is about. It's really about creating the conditions for happiness and fulfillment. How do we create situations around us to make happiness happen? And how do we make sure that we're not just waiting for the right moment for happiness? How do we make sure that we're not just waiting for the right conditions for happiness, and that we're really creating happiness ourselves? And so these are actually the title names in the book. And it's really about how we can find joy, and we can really think about our purpose and why we work and why we want to make a contribution, and the kinds of unique contributions that we each make. And we look at culture and organizational culture and company culture and how we fit And it's always also about growth and success. You know, there's really interesting research on thriving. And the idea of thriving is so related to happiness. Thriving and happiness have to do with not just success, but also growth and development. And two, you were asking at the beginning about how happiness is related to learning and development and growth. And that is a really interesting thing. When people are happy, they tend to set more ambitious goals, and they tend to reach those goals more successfully, and they tend to stretch and grow to a greater extent. So it's almost like happiness is fuel for this growth that we can all get around. So that's a little bit about what the book is about. But why is that important to us now? I think it's just so critical as we think about getting back to the office or getting back to something a little bit more normal. You know, depending on your business, you may have had people who stayed working in the office, who were partly working in the office, who completely were home working because of the pandemic. But as we return, people really want to feel good. And there is a pent up demand for us to really think about that experience that we're creating for ourselves, and as HR professionals and leaders, how you're creating it for other people. And we're seeing a huge influence of HR right now globally. You know, as we think about work experience and workplace, I think it used to be something that facilities leaders and real estate leaders were really focused on. And HR has really come into a position of incredible influence because there's a new focus on people and the importance of people's experience. I think the other thing to note is that people have been absolutely struggling through the pandemic. And we know this is true globally. It's true in every continent. It's true in almost every country. The more people work from home, the longer the pandemic goes on, the more people feel socially isolated, depressed, anxious. And there have been so many studies about that. So now is the time for us to be really looking for fulfillment and to find happiness in new ways as we emerge from the pandemic together. I think one other thing to say is that happiness is related to individuals and to teams and to leaders and organizations. And so there are layers in terms of how we think about happiness. And I'll talk just a little bit more about that in a bit. I love this quote. The best way to predict the future is to create it. And we are at a moment where we can predict the future. You know, people are so conscious of the way that they work, of why they work, of where they work, of with whom they work, because of all of the changes we've been through. So we have an opportunity to not just come back from the coronavirus, but to really accelerate and to make things even better than what they used to be. So we can be creating the future together. So we would love to ask you some poll questions. Let me get this launched. So here's the question you can ask or answer at any time. To what extent do you feel connected to a broader purpose? Absolutely, I am so clear about my reason to wake up every morning. Or, yes, sure, but it's not like I'm thinking about it every day. Or, honestly, it's tough. I'm happy if I make it from my morning coffee to my evening glass of wine or iced tea. So go ahead and answer these if you don't mind, and we'll see how you feel about this question about purpose. The reason I ask is that purpose is one of the critical factors in creating happiness. When you feel a greater sense of purpose, you tend to feel happier. And you don't necessarily have to have a giant purpose where you're, solving global problems or you're, solving world issues, but just an idea of how you matter to your people that are in your life really contributes to happiness. And that sense of, why do you need to wake up in the morning? It could be as simple as you make breakfast for your family. It could be as simple as the contribution that you make day to day in your work. That sense of purpose is really important. So let's see how we came out on this one. Oh, look at that. If we turn it on its side, it's like a perfect normal distribution. But yeah, it looks like 30% of you say, absolutely, you're clear. 43% of you are saying, yeah, pretty much, not over the top though. And 29% of you are saying it's tough. And boy, we can all relate to all of those. I think that's one of the things that's been true about the pandemic is it has ebbed and flowed. It's gone up and down. And so there may be days where we feel like we can, jump out of bed in the morning, and may be other days where we feel a little less motivated. And that's really okay because we can all be in different places on it. So thank you for participating in that poll. So let me say a couple of things about happiness. One is, it is yours to create. It is ours to create. It's not like we have to wait for somebody to give us permission. It's not like we have to have the perfect situation and then happiness will blossom. We can make choices. We can create situations. We can behave in ways that influence other people. And all of that means that we can create happiness to some extent. I think the other thing is that happiness doesn't have to be constant. It's not like it's all, fields of roses and butterflies. It absolutely goes up and down. And there may be days, like I said, where we feel great, and there may be days when we are struggling, and that's okay. Overall, hopefully we're feeling a sense of joy and happiness, even knowing that it may go up and down, and giving ourselves permission for our happiness levels to change over time. Here is something else that I think is really important and interesting about happiness. And that is that happiness is like a magnet. When we are happy, we tend to draw people to us. Think about when you go to a restaurant or when you go out and you have service somewhere and somebody is helping you who loves what they do and they're just more positive. That is the person that you want to work with, that you appreciate especially. And the other thing is that when businesses have more people working with them who are more positive and more engaged, they too tend to be a magnet for customers because the way that employees are having an experience absolutely is mirrored with customers. So happiness is a magnet, and it's so good for our well-being. It is correlated with health, with longevity and lifespan. It is correlated with better kinds of results for businesses. It is even correlated with better results for a country. Like countries are healthier and countries are more economically successful when people report they are more happy. So there are lots of benefits, even if it's something that goes up and down and ebbs and flows a little bit. Let's talk a minute about where happiness comes from. There are actually 3 ways that you experience happiness, or that are the sources for happiness, the origins for happiness. And one is genetics. There have been studies that have shown that there are some people who are predisposed to be happier. And so there really is a genetic component. But circumstances also matter. If we've been in situations that have encouraged happiness and nurtured happiness, that matters. But even if we haven't, our choices matter as well. So we can overcome genetics, we can overcome circumstances by making our own choices. And so I think it's interesting to think that there are these three elements of happiness, some of which are inborn, some of which are circumstances out of our control, but there are also elements that are within our control to create happiness. And we will talk more about that. Here's another poll question for you. Let me launch it and have you go ahead and give some thought to this one. To what extent are you personally optimistic? Totally, I've always been very positive and upbeat. Somewhat, I'm not over the top though, or not so much. I'm better at finding places where people need to improve. So this one's interesting, right? Because we all have different personalities. We all have different approaches. We sure wouldn't want everybody to be the same, obviously, but we can understand kind of what our perspective is and really know how we're interacting with others so that we can be our best selves and so we can be most effective. That is emotional intelligence, understanding how we feel, how we come across, and how we can continuously improve. So I love it. All right, let's look at our polling. Looks like lots of you are really positive and upbeat. Super cool, awesome. And some of you are saying, yeah, somewhat. And others are maybe better at pointing out where we need help. I think it's really important to also celebrate the people who may be in a situation where they're really good at being critical or playing devil's advocate. I wrote an article not too long ago about people that you need in your network in order to be successful. And one type of person was a cheerleader personality, the person who's always going to say, you can do it, you know, rah, rah. And another type of person you need in your network is the person who's going to tell you straight what's not working. They are the person who's going to tell you when you can do better, who's going to give you hard feedback. And so really appreciate people who can give that hard feedback and help us all be better. So really cool. And you all saw those results. I hope I shared those results with you. All right, terrific. So let's go on. So here's something to think about as well. Every choice you make has assets and liabilities. I love this concept because I think sometimes we think when we're making a life choice, oh my gosh, I've got to choose the perfect path. You know how there are those certain life moments where every choice you make matters? Every day we make choices that matter, but then there are those moments in life where you know it's a giant choice. Who you choose for a partner, which job you choose, where you choose to live, those are biggies. And I think we can get caught up in, oh, I've got to make just the right choice. And I think one of the things to remember is that every choice will come with both pros and cons. Every choice is its own bucket of assets and liabilities. You know, I'm going to choose a partner and there are lots of things I really love about that person. And then there are a few things that annoy me about that person. Or I'm going to choose a job and there are a lot of things I'm going to love about that job. And then there are, of course, going to be some things that are just frustrating or difficult or challenging. And so I think it's helpful to realize that any choice we make is its own set. And hopefully the choices we make have more of the positives and less of the negatives. There's a wonderful way to think about your work, and that is, what are the things that you have to do every day? What are the things that you love to do? And there will absolutely be things that you have to do that you do not love doing. Expense reports are a good example for me. But what you want is more of the things that you like to do and that you have to do overlapping. And the book actually has a little diagram about this. But I really like that idea that there is no perfect choice. The reason that's important is that it takes the pressure off. We know that we can make a different choice. Our daughter just graduated from college and our son just started college. They're 4 years apart. And when they were choosing their college, we really said, make the best choice you can. Put tons of effort into choosing the right match. But also know that you can change your mind. And if a college isn't the best fit, you can transfer to another college. Life is like that in many ways. We want to put tons of effort into the right choice. And then once we've made it, commit to making it work. But in things like college or jobs, sometimes you can absolutely make a different choice as well. The other thing about this that's really interesting is that there's both the concept of agency and structure. Agency is I have empowerment, I have choice, I can control things around me. Structure is the company has policies and practices. My country has laws and regulations. My culture has certain systems. And those might be outside of my control to some extent. I can seek to influence them, but they're somewhat out of my control. And so I think the important thing for us as leaders is to say, we can make certain choices and we can model the way. Sociologically speaking, the most important way that people learn is through watching other people. Even if we're not thinking consciously about it, we're watching and we're learning all the time. So as leaders, you have influence as people are watching you, but also we can influence our company's systems and structures and policies and practices. As leaders, we can influence the structure part of that as well. And then lastly, there are 3 ways to think about responding to a situation that might be difficult. Sometimes it helps to change your thinking. There's that great quote, change your thinking, change your life. So sometimes it's about your own thought process and you can kind of talk yourself through something, talk yourself through a hard time. The other thing we can do is seek to change the circumstances. If we have influence, if we have leadership, we can seek to change the circumstances. Or if we've done our best, we can choose to opt out, to move on to something else. That's not true of every life situation, of course, but I think it's interesting to think about those 3 options depending on the circumstance that we're in. So there are some really significant business benefits to happiness. I think sometimes we hear from business leaders, yeah, but happiness is so fluffy. Do we really need to think about happiness? Shouldn't we be thinking about shareholder value and the efficiencies and the costs? And yes, of course we should, but happiness has some bottom line benefits. People are healthier, they live longer, and they cost us less in terms of insurance costs. People, when they are happy, make better decisions. They are better performing in their jobs. They're more likely to stay at your company or your organization. And there's data on all of these that I can send you if you're interested. When people are happy, they set bigger goals and they seek to learn new information. That's good for our companies and good for business, because when people are stretching and growing, that grows the company. The other thing that's interesting is when people are happy, they tend to be more likable. That's really good, because when colleagues get along together better, that creates success for a business more likely. And when our customers like our employees, that makes a difference as well. So likability. Here is something else. When you create more autonomy for your employees, that tends to create more happiness for them. So this is one of the ways that we can think about as leaders, as HR influencers. The more we give people a sense of choice and control, the happier they will be, and we know about the benefits of happiness. Steelcase did a very cool study. This is a few years ago. We've done some really cool recent studies as well. But a few years ago, we did a study that demonstrated when people had more choice and control, they actually were more engaged. There was absolute correlation between those. The other thing is that work and life tend to spill over into each other. When I'm having a great experience at work, it spills over into the rest of my life. I come home and I'm happier at dinner time. I come home and I have more energy for the walk with the dog after work. The same is true going the opposite way. When I'm happier in my life at home or outside of work or doing anything else, it tends to spill over into work. I'm happier coming into the office. I feel better about my colleagues. I feel better about the work that I'm doing. So all of these are benefits of happiness. And I already mentioned the country benefit, that we actually have better health and GDP, gross domestic product, and even educational attainment when people are happier. So lots and lots of great opportunities for us to think about business benefits. So here's another poll question for you. Let me launch it a minute. Let's see. Oh, shoot. I hope I wasn't sharing those results that whole time. I hope you could see my slides. All right, I'm going to launch the polling. To what extent does your business focus on employees or well-being? A lot, it's part of who we are and how we do business. Somewhat, it's important, but not the highest priority because of all of our other priorities. Or honestly, we don't focus on it very much. So curious about your impressions. I did a really interesting set of articles lately on well-being, and I had the opportunity to interview about 4 or 5 senior leaders at global companies, and they were talking about well-being and wellness, and talking about the extent to which they are seeing a huge increase in the emphasis on wellness, on the centrality of well-being, on how well-being is perceived as being really strategic in terms of what's important to companies. So that was interesting. Well-being is moving to the center. Well-being is becoming more strategic. Senior leaders are more focused on well-being. And so the reason that's important is that if we are competing with other companies for the best and the brightest talent, well-being could be one of the things that sets us apart. And we know that well-being and happiness are so related to each other. I mentioned lifespan, I mentioned health, I mentioned kind of the physical elements of our well-being that are associated with happiness. So those things are super related. So this is a perfect split, 50-50. Some of you are saying you focus on happiness or well-being a lot. Others are saying somewhat, along with other priorities. So really interesting to hear what you all think and what your perspectives are on well-being. I'd love, when we get to the Q&A, I'd love to hear what you do to support well-being. What's your strategy? What are the approaches that you take? Would love to hear about that. So let's talk about leadership and the HR role. You know, there was a really great study that looked at mental health, mental wellness, And it found there was this perfect correlation between the extent to which people felt mental health and the extent to which they thought leaders were attentive and caring and empathetic. And so leaders and HR influencers have a really important role to play in terms of people feeling really supported. So leaders need to be present and accessible. Leaders need to be attentive. And I think that there's sometimes leaders who say, oh, I don't want to be invasive. I don't want to ask too many questions that, people would feel funny about. But we don't have to ask too many questions, but if we check in, if we ask people how they're doing, and then we can take cues from them about how much they want to talk about it. So leaders who are present and attentive have everything to do with happiness and well-being. We already talked about choice and control, but think about the kinds of choice that you can give people. I wrote an article about this not too long ago. When we give people choice and control, they tend to be more engaged. We can give people choices about as much as possible, how much they come into the office. And this depends on the job, of course, depends on the leader, depends on the team, but just things to think about: how much they come into the office, what kind of work they do, with whom they work, what hours they work, where they work and what they work on. Those are all super relevant in terms of the choices that we can give people. So think about where people work. You can give them a choice about maybe how much they come into the office. You could create offices with lots of variety so that within the office, people can choose where they're working. The other one I like to think about is what people are working on. Like I might hire someone for a certain job. That's cool. But maybe there's a percentage of time where they could work on a project where they're innovating something new. Or maybe there's a percentage of time where they could be part of another project in the company that they're especially interested in, even if it's outside of their formal job description. So I think we have the opportunity to think creatively about the choices that we can really give people. The whole person is a big deal too. So how do we think about not just people's physical health, but their emotional health, their health in terms of their cognitive capability? We've seen so many organizations that are doing things like yoga classes on Mondays, or financial fitness, financial skills classes on Thursdays, or companies who are saying that they're going to hold meetings instead of a 60-minute meeting, they're going to have a 55-minute meeting so that people have time to transition between meetings. All kinds of things can make a difference in terms of focusing on the whole experience that people are having. Even things like daylight and views matter in an organization. And so as we think about the place and as we think about the holistic work experience, all of those can have a bearing on happiness. Here's something else that's super important, and that is letting people know they matter. I love the concept of line of sight. We talk about in design, we talk about line of sight all the time. Like I want to be able to see from my workstation someday when I'm in the office again. I want to be able to see from my workstation to my colleague, or I want to be able to look up and see my leader is right there and I can, call him or her over and ask a question. That line of sight is important. But there's also a figurative line of sight, like the idea that my work impacts his work, impacts her work, impacts their work, and that impacts the customer. That that chain that I'm a part of. And so as leaders, as HR influencers, we have the opportunity to reinforce for people their unique contribution, and we have the opportunity to reinforce how their contribution lines up and makes a difference to other people in the value chain. I think too, sometimes there is a myth that happiness comes from lots of relaxation, plenty of, not working too hard. And actually, hard work can be a wonderful thing in terms of driving happiness. Of course, we need vacation. Of course, we need time away. Of course, we need relaxation and rejuvenation. But also, it is a really good thing to sweat. And we can think about sweating either literally or figuratively. Like maybe I'm just literally working hard and it feels good to put so much effort forward. Or figuratively, I'm figuring out a hard problem. I'm trying to solve something I don't already know. I'm thinking really hard about something that is really difficult. And when I figure it out, it's so rewarding. So I think that this idea of challenge and giving people tough problems and linking people together to solve those problems is a big deal. Reinforcing teamwork. We can do Zoom happy hours a lot. We can get people together and do social stuff all the time. But what really bonds people, if we look at sociological literature, what really bonds people best is working hard on a problem together. You roll up your sleeves and you have to figure it out together. That tends to really bond people. So as leaders, we have real tangible opportunities to create happiness for ourselves and for other people. So those are just some ideas for you. Here's another poll question. Let me launch it for you. Let's see. Stop sharing poll results. Last poll question. Here we go. Oh, let's see. Sorry. Maybe we are not going to do a poll. I think we are not going to do a poll. Sorry about that. The other part of happiness is you have to be able to fail and learn and move forward. So that's an example of this. So here's another one for you. You also want to avoid seeking happiness. Well, that sounds strange, doesn't it? Aren't we having a conversation about happiness? Absolutely. But this is interesting. Research has demonstrated that if we're seeking happiness all the time, it's sort of like you go to the beach and the sand just falls through your fingers. It's almost impossible to really hold on to it. The reason that it's tough to find happiness when you're pursuing happiness is because running toward happiness and trying to reach it reminds you that you don't already have it. It reinforces the idea that it somehow is off in the distance and it's not something you can achieve right now. And so a better idea and the way that you can find happiness instead of pursuing happiness itself is to focus on what you already have and to focus on the idea of enough. When we are focused on what we already have instead of running after something that we want, that is a contributor toward happiness. The other thing that's wonderful is to focus on others. Clinically, if people are depressed, one of the very effective ways to treat depression is to have people do volunteer work, because it tends to open up your perspective. In fact, physiologically, when you're feeling depressed, normally your peripheral vision would be about 180 degrees. Physiologically, physically, your vision narrows when you're under stress or when you're depressed to about 30 degrees. It's a physical manifestation of that limiting thinking. And so sometimes if people are unhappy, they're so focused inward, like, they're thinking about their problems and thinking about their challenges and thinking about the things that are really, really tough. And by volunteering, by focusing on others, you tend to open that field of vision, which is a really good thing toward happiness. The other thing to think about is the process, not the product. You know, when our kids were little, my mom helped to take care of them, and she was a school teacher, so she was really, really good with little kids, just a brilliant, brilliant kind of talent with children. And she used to do lots and lots of art projects with the kids, you know, everything from macaroni necklaces to, you know, dough where you're making, you know, making little animals, that kind of thing. And she used to always say, the most important thing is the process, not the product. It doesn't matter if the macaroni necklace turns out to be cool or not cool. It doesn't matter if the little clay animal comes apart or not. It's the process of creating. It's the process of learning and growing and trying and testing new things that will go the longest. And that was about developing capabilities, but it was also about fulfillment. And I think we can think about that for our own happiness as well. Like it's not like we're pursuing something and we can't be happy until we reach that certain thing, until we get that promotion, until we get that raise, until we get that certain job, until we, I don't know, marry that certain person. Our happiness can come even before we reach a certain end point. And so the way that we progress, the way that we take steps forward by itself can be a source of happiness. And I think that's something to remember as well. And that will keep happiness from sifting through our fingers like sand on a beach. Here's how we influence happiness. Here's how we create happiness. First of all, gratitude is a big deal. Really being appreciative of so many things, waking up in the morning and thinking, what's one thing I'm appreciative of? Before we go to bed at night, thinking, what's one thing that was good that happened to me today? Really being grateful. There's a wonderful quote I love, and it says, appreciate the little things in life because someday you'll realize they were the big things. And so family is like that, right? Those small moments that we have together, those are the moments that will really drive happiness. In fact, I'm working right now on something I call the Happiness Project, and Dan has been an amazing contributor to this. But the idea is that people will give me moments of happiness in their life, just small moments. It might be the cup of coffee that I enjoyed this morning, or the article that I read that I really appreciated, or looking out and seeing the squirrels playing on the bird feeder. Small moments of happiness that we can appreciate and we can inspire others are a big deal. So if you have anything like that, reach out to me and I'd love to put it on my website. The other thing is generosity. Statistically speaking, when we give more, we tend to feel happier. There was this lovely study where they gave everybody a small amount of money, like enough to buy, popcorn at a movie, right? Not tons and tons of money, but enough to buy like something about that big. And half of the group got to spend the money on something they wanted. They could just go out and buy themselves something. The other half of the group were able to give the money or give a purchased object to others. And then they reported back on their happiness. And absolutely, there was correlation. The people who gave away the money or gave away a purchase were significantly happier. Generosity correlates to so many good things because it links us with community. And community and belonging are a really critical part of happiness. They form a structure, a netting, a webbing that give us a wonderful, wonderful feeling of security and give us the opportunity to stretch. So think about, like the person on the trapeze and the safety net under them. You feel a lot better about taking a risk walking across the trapeze if you have a safety net. So community is like a safety net, those relationships with each other. And generosity is the thing that reminds us that we're in community and helps us to feel like we're making a contribution to it. Materialism is interesting too. There was a new study that said that when people are more focused on stuff, like the best car or the best clothes or the best something, they tend to be less happy. So there's something about consumption that works against happiness. So here's something else. We talked a lot in our planning, Mia and I, about tech and engineering and how intensive those roles can be. And I think one of the things we can do as leaders and HR influencers, HR leaders, is to be tactical sometimes about how we create happiness. The more intense a role is, the more people need rejuvenation, relaxation, reminders about their contribution. One of the ways that we know this is there have been some studies with IT professionals, people who are doing coding and really intensive, work on their computers through Agile or through other kinds of work processes in the IT world. And the more intense people were, the more they needed relaxation and rejuvenation. So here are just some tactics for you. How do you think about engaging people? How do you think about involving your employees? One thing that I've seen leaders do that's very cool is they get everybody together in a room and they hand out thank you notes. They go and buy thank you notes and give them, enough for each team member. And then each team member writes a thank you note to each other team member, just like thank you for something they appreciate about each other. And then you give people the notes. The other thing that we've done that's been really fun in team sessions, especially virtual sessions, is we've used a ping pong paddle with two sides. So, some ping pong paddles, say that 10 times fast, are, red or black or green or blue, but hopefully they've got two sides that are different colors. And we'll ask people, like partway through meetings, we'll say, do you prefer to spend time in the woods or on a beach? Do you prefer morning or evening? Do you prefer, dogs or cats? And so people will vote with their paddle, like the people who prefer the beach are holding up the red and the people who prefer the woods are holding up the black. And it's just a fun way to kind of get to know each other, and it doesn't take very long. You can do it in the middle of a really serious business meeting and just every now and then kind of ask a question that's an either or question. Breakout rooms are great so that people can connect. I talked to somebody who looked at the science of happiness, and she talked about one thing they did. This is going to sound really crazy, but during a meeting, they were reinforcing the way that we hold emotion in our body. Like, how you can get a stiff neck if you're unhappy, or you can get a headache if you're feeling really stressed or frustrated. So they had everybody kind of close their eyes and just think about the, different parts of their body so that they could do this scan of where they might feel pressure and then be able to release that. Another colleague had a great idea where she said, there are less people in the office right now, and it just doesn't feel very activated. There's no buzz, it feels empty. And so she said, we should have certain hours where we encourage people to come to the work cafe and work together in the work cafe. So we at least feel a sense of community. We might not be working together, but we might be working alone together, and that can create that sense of happiness and togetherness. Last idea that I think is pretty cool is I used to work at a company that had a walking trail all around the grounds, and we would regularly hold walking meetings. So like if it was a meeting where you didn't have to see a screen or you didn't have to write things down, we would schedule those during a walk. And the other thing you can do is, like, maybe there's a senior executive and every Tuesday at noon, he's going to take a walk around the building or take a walk around a nearby area. And that's the opportunity for people to just kind of walk and talk with him. So there are strategic ways to think about happiness and the impact it has on the business. And there are really straightforward tactical ways to think about it. It doesn't get much more tactical than a ping pong paddle, but everything counts. All of those leverage points count toward creating a culture of happiness, a culture of empowerment where people are creating the conditions for happiness. I love this. It's amazing how a little tomorrow can make up for a whole lot of yesterday. We can create the future together. We can create the conditions for happiness for ourselves. And maybe even more importantly, as leaders, as HR leaders, as HR influencers, creating the conditions for other people. You think about it, and we spend so much of our time working. We used to say we spend so much of our time at the office. Many of us are working from home, but we're still spending a large proportion of our time working. So if that time is rewarding, if that time is fulfilling, we are contributing to a much broader purpose in terms of influencing the community as a whole. Not just the community of our workplace, but the community as a whole, even outside of the workplace, because of the spillover effect of happiness. So we have so many opportunities going forward. This is our time for a bright future. We have been so disrupted. I like to say that from the greatest barriers come the greatest innovations. If we weren't struggling, we could just kind of go along like we have always gone. But when we are absolutely constrained, when the world is turned upside down, that is when we have to do things in new ways. And so this can be a new beginning. We can think in creative ways. We can solve problems. We can stretch in new ways. And we can take a future forward toward happiness and fulfillment. I like to say that there may have been things that seemed out of reach, like maybe you wanted to go for that new job or go for that promotion, and it just felt a little out of reach. But for goodness sakes, now we are living through a global pandemic. And if we can get through this, we can get through anything. So that thing that seemed out of reach may actually be more within reach than you think. Maybe you always wanted to try skydiving and it just seemed a little unrealistic. But now is the time when you can jump out of an airplane, because if you can get through this, you can do anything. So where do we go from here? If you want the book, it's available in lots of different outlets. There's a discussion guide that you can download from my website. Let's connect on LinkedIn. And I mentioned this earlier, if you want to share a moment of happiness, let me know. I'd love to put that on my website. And I'm writing regularly on Forbes.com. You can see that on the website, but also you can follow, if you go to the Forbes website and to my section, you can hit the follow button and it will give you the opportunity to see some of those things. So thank you for your time. I'm gonna stop sharing and hand it back to you, Mia, too, and super excited for questions that may be coming in.
Yes, thank you a lot, Tracy. It actually make us really, really happy after your sharings. because like as like Pooh and me just said, like it's just like the healing sections. It's not a presentation, it's like the healing sections for everyone in this room. So here you talk about the happiness. So we're really happy to receive a lot of questions and want to ask you. So actually I will let my guest for today, Miss Pooh, to ask the questions first.
Um, Hi, Tracy. So I've received some questions that which are also on the same page of my concern. The very first one from Ji Thuy Pham. She's the HRPP from Tiki, and she has a question for you. How to arouse and maintain happiness for engineers and tech geeks? And also another, similar question from Miss Sarah. She's the office manager in Grasshopper, which is also one of our Dreamworks member. She asked you about the example of how to reinforce teamwork.
Those are such good ones. So how do we create happiness for tech geeks?
Yeah.
I love that. You know, I think one of the things we have to do is reinforce for them their contribution, the importance of their contribution. Because I think sometimes tech geeks can just get so focused on their work, right? And they're so narrow in their focus and deep in their focus in a really good way. So we can reinforce their contribution. And I think help them think about the broader purpose. How do they make a difference in the bigger picture of how we serve our customers or the results that we're driving? I think that's part of it. And then I think the other thing we can do is help them find balance, help them feel good about taking a break or relaxing or rejuvenating, making sure they're taking vacation and not letting vacation go. So those are a few things for those tech geeks or those engineers or those people who are, you know, super intense in other ways. In terms of how we reinforce teamwork, I love that because teamwork is a pathway to happiness. We are wired for connection. Our brains are wired for connection. In fact, we experience craving for other people and our connections with other people in the same parts of our brain where we experience a craving for food. Isn't that funny? So maybe you're craving chocolate. It's really, you know, you're craving people. So how we reinforce teamwork, I think we give people lots of time together. Sociologically speaking, the more we see each other, the more we talk to each other, the more we know about each other, the more forgiving we are. Like we just kind of get that person over time. And so teamwork is built on time together. I think too, teamwork is built on sharing common problems, sharing common goals. So give people a project to do together. Give people projects across boundaries. So maybe it's a marketing person with an IT person solving a problem together, or maybe it's an engineering person with an HR person solving a problem together. I think those are a really big deal.
Yeah, really great answer. And that's also answer another questions from Miss Sarah because she asked the question is that more about the different generations because as we mentioned above that happiness is quite a different meanings for each other and to the older one is kind of like the work-life balance and for the other younger it's more about the money and challenging yeah so she asked about like, is there any tips that are any activities that you can both for both generations that come together and like have strengthened our bonding?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
That's
think
a really
yeah some of the tips
people.
that you already mentioned on the presentations already. So can you share another tips like the practical tips that you
Yeah.
already did to your company that can give us a more example for that?
Yeah, I think that one of the things you're so right. a lot of times I like to think about this as a life stage question. You know, like it's not whether I'm 20 or 30 or 40 or 50. It's kind of whether I'm new in my career, whether I'm, you know, raising a young family, whether I'm an empty nester, whether I'm thinking about retirement. It's those life stage moments that matter. So I think when people are earlier in their career, they're at an earlier life stage, they want to grow and develop and get promoted and make more money. One of the practical tips is to give people time with leaders. Like we hear that people so want to hear from leaders. They want communication from leaders. So doing like round tables with leaders, doing lunch and learns with leaders, having leaders do one-on-ones with high potential people. I think too, identifying who those people are that are high potential and making sure that we're meeting with them regularly to ask them about their career goals. So that would be for like earlier in your career, right? Typically younger, but in general, earlier in your career. I think when you're middle career, you're raising a family and you've got a million different things to worry about. And so sometimes happiness comes from being able to juggle all those responsibilities. So it could be making sure that people are taking vacation. It could be an app that helps them support their mental health. It could be additional childcare options or emergency childcare. Like if something happens and my childcare isn't available, I have an emergency childcare option. It could be groups of supporters that come together. Like I know some companies do a young parents kind of a support group together because it's tough to be a parent. We can all agree on that. It's wonderful and rewarding, and it can be tough. So those support groups are a big deal. And then later career, people want to share what they know. So I think we can do roundtables where we ask people to contribute their knowledge. I think we can capture stories which contribute to the culture and reinforce for someone the value that they've brought. The other thing that's a great idea is to give people the opportunity to scale down slowly. So instead of I work full time and then I'm retired, maybe I work full time and then I go to 4 days a week for 6 months, and then I go to 3 days a week for 6 months, and then I scale down. So those are some ideas.
Thank you. I think Ms. Sarah already received a lot of ideas to bonding her teams. So another question that you can see in the chat, people are really interesting about these questions because I also heard as well. I saw her really totally on the same page. So this question is from Min Jane. Should we choose a happier job with low salary or a happy so-so but high salary?
You know what? I had the opportunity to make this choice. And you know, my children were the best people to give me advice. My husband gave me this advice too, but I especially loved hearing it from my kids. I absolutely, you can feel differently about this, but I think it's all about the happiness. I really think that a lower salary with higher happiness is a better value equation, because you think about with money, you can buy time, you can buy convenience, you can buy things, but you can never buy happiness. On the other hand, if you have a job that gives you lots of happiness, you can probably progress and stretch and grow in that job because you'll be energized by it. So everybody's different. Everybody has different needs for leadership and money and, you know, growth and development and freedom and time off. So it's a very individual decision. And I totally respect people who may have a different perspective, but I prioritize happiness a little higher than money.
Okay. Thank you for your idea. So Manjay have the answer. So Tracy definitely choose happiness.
That's right. Go happiness.
Okay. So I received a questions from Miss Mai from Navigos Group. Is many young people put a good working environment as a priority when looking for work, and they also quit their previous job due to the unsatisfied working environment. So what is the advice for them? Should they try, should they keep trying to looking for the better environments, or how can they try building one?
Oh, that's a really good one. You know, I talk about that in the book a little bit. Like, I really believe that we all have so much influence, more than we know, regardless of our role. And so I think there's so much to be said for trying to build a great work experience, you know, like talking to people about what you need, gathering data and facts to make a case for what you want, creating really good relationships with colleagues, because those relationships with others are part of a great work experience. So I think we put everything we can into making it work today. The other thing is that if we're in a job that isn't quite where we want to be, I think we have to perform brilliantly. Like, maybe your favorite thing in the whole world isn't, you know, flipping the burgers. Maybe you'd rather be the manager, but by goodness, in the short term, be the best possible burger flipper, right? So perform brilliantly no matter what your job is. But all work has dignity. Every job that we can do makes a contribution to society. So always value what you do. On the other hand, if you've given it your all and you just can't see that there are changes that are happening, I think we need to give ourselves permission to opt out, to make a new choice. And I have used before a 2x2, you know, 2x2, like, what's the size of the problem and what's your level of influence? And if the problem is huge and so is your influence, go for it, try to solve it, right? If your problem is huge and your influence is small, maybe that's an opportunity to opt out. If the problem is small and your influence is big, hey, you're all in for making a change to the situation. So I think that's another helpful way to think about that one.
It looks like this question is for us, the young people.
Yeah.
Yes. So, do you have any questions that you want to raise up?
Oh yeah, I've got a question from Miss Per. Sure. So there's a perception that it is better to find the meaning in the job than to find the happiness at work. What do you think about this? And is there any connection between these two?
So that's for me, yes?
Yeah. Yes.
Meaning is a big deal. Meaning is a really important pathway to happiness. When we feel that greater sense of meaning, we tend to feel happier. So I think we always want to think about the logic train to what matters. I was talking to someone and he worked on an assembly line making a little part, but the part went into a mechanism, and the mechanism went into a hospital a crank on a hospital bed, and nurses would crank the bed so that people could move and not get bed sores, so they could get healthier and go home sooner. And so he felt such a sense of meaning. He was making this little part, but it mattered in that kind of train of logic. So I think we want to think about the meaning in our work. No matter how small what we're doing seems, it has some kind of an impact. And so that will contribute toward happiness as well. Definitely a relationship between meaning and happiness.
Really great. Yeah. So actually we just have time for another question. There's a lot of questions come up, but we are so sorry about this, but we just have time for only one question. So this question is from Lisa, but I do think that many other people, especially from the HR department, and also finance department that want to ask is that like could you share more information on how we link our measures the happiness to the business performance, and can we say that engagement is as the same of the happiness, and also what is the fundamental difference about that?
Yeah, so engagement is about discretionary effort. It's about intensity and it's about dedication and it's about the extent to which I'm energized by my work. And we can measure engagement significantly through surveys. Happiness has to do with engagement plus other things. I think it's a bigger concept. Engagement is part of it. Happiness also has to do with growth, development, feeling connected with other people. And we can make the business case for happiness. We can measure happiness through surveys, through performance data that we can look at through like performance management systems, through asking people in entrance moments and in their exit interviews. Those are places where we can ask questions of people. And if we can report on increases in happiness based on survey results and then look at our stockholder results and our business results and relate those together, those are good ways to measure.
Okay, look like we've done with everything now, and it's actually starting tomorrow is our holidays in Vietnam, and it was really great to hear you talking about happiness before the vacations. So thank you so much for joining us, Tracy, and for everyone. We will send you the slide from Tracy and also the recording for these sections. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Have a great holiday.
You too. Have a good night. I know it's really totally late in US right now.
I'm thrilled to be with you, no matter what time it is. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
See you later. Bye-bye. Sweet dreams. I love it. Thank you.
Bye.